But my hair, or should I just so don't really cooperate, does it? I think I just put fingernail marks from my foundation. How's that? I think that'll do. Okay. Hi guys, welcome back or welcome to my channel. I'm Danielle. In this video I'm going to be giving you guys, I guess, some reading updates. I haven't done a reading video, I want to say, for like 5 months now, if not more than 5 months. I had planned to do regular reading updates, reading wrap-ups, TBRs and all that jazz, but you know, 2020, so pretty much none of that happened. I did do a couple of TBRs, maybe 3 TBRs actually, earlier in the year, and then I don't think I did any wrap-ups. I just did one recent reads video, and then yeah, did nothing after that. So this is a catch-up of sorts. My goal this year was to read 26 books, and it's almost like I knew I wouldn't be doing a lot of reading, so I went like a little low with my challenge. Right now I am officially halfway through the challenge. I've currently read 13 books, so yeah, like I said, halfway through. Doing a lot of pointing. I'm gonna just carry on from where I left off in my recent reads #1 video, which I will tag up here. I'm gonna start off talking about, I got notes here. I wanna just say, being that I've read 13 books so far and my goal is to read 26 books this year, at this point in the year I should have read, I don't know how many I should have read, but I'm like 2.5 months behind schedule, and I should have been finishing a book every 2 weeks. I didn't. Anyway, the year isn't over. I could still achieve my goal, and I feel like I'm in a better place to do that now than I was earlier. So, you know, we're gonna see. Anyway, should we talk about some books? That's what we're here for, innit? Alright, so the first book I want to talk about is After I Do, but hold on. I forgot that I actually still have the book with me because it's a library book. I've literally had a couple of these library books in my house since like March. But anyway, I didn't keep them longer than I should have done. They just kept renewing them automatically for me because they were closed. Okay, irrelevant tangent. So, the first book I want to talk about is After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book is actually the first Taylor Jenkins Reid book that I've read, and I feel kind of middle of the road with it, like I could take it or leave it kind of thing. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. It didn't really make that much of an impression on me, but it didn't leave me not wanting to try her other books, if that makes sense. Perhaps I should tell you what it's about. Okay, so After I Do is about Lauren and Ryan. Let me just double check that those are their names. Yeah, Lauren and Ryan. They're a couple who've been together for quite a while. I think like 11 years, and they've been married for 6 of those 11 years. Long story short, they've become like disillusioned with their marriage and with each other, and they decide to do like a trial separation to see if they want to stay married or not. Even though I have some notes, I feel like I'm really having to go back into the archives of my memory to remember what I think about this book. And I guess that in itself speaks volumes in it, because it really didn't leave that much of an impression on me. One thing that I didn't love was that when Ryan was talking about Lauren's love of food, he would describe it as a love of weird food. For example, he described Ethiopian food as weird, and it's like, to me it was just like clear that this guy wouldn't know good food if it like hit him in the face kind of thing. Seasoned food isn't weird. Yeah, whatever, he's just a sourceless character. You can't blame him. To be honest with you, I wasn't all that interested in their relationship, and I feel like the familial side was more interesting to me, like her relationships with the members of her family, and then Ryan's relationships with the members of her family. All of that was way more interesting to me than those two, especially because, I don't know if this is considered a spoiler, because the point of it is that they spend a year apart in it. They spend a year apart, and more work is done on themselves, I feel like, than their actual marriage. Obviously, you know, with all the marriages that I have in my past, obviously it's important to be like a whole functioning person separate to your wife / husband, whatever. But like the point, I don't know, man, being that the issue was with their marriage, I don't really feel like their issues were really addressed. Those are my thoughts. Even though this book really didn't do a whole lot for me, because I didn't entirely hate it, and people on BookTube are always talking about how good her books are, I'm down to read more from her, and I think I will do. I actually have one of her other books in my room. I can't remember what it's called, but it's the one with like the white and blue covers. I'm gonna give that a go. And if I feel the same kind of indifference towards that, maybe then I'll give Taylor Jenkins Reid a pass going forward, but I don't know, whatever. It's just kind of a literally a take it or leave it kind of vibe. I don't feel like it did anything for me, but it also didn't take anything away from me, I guess, except the time it took to read it. I don't know, whatever. Alright, moving on. The next book I read was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This book is Elizabeth I feel like her name isn't a tongue twister, but coming out of my mouth it sounds like one. This is Elizabeth Acevedo. It's my teeth, man. They're just not where they should be. This is her debut novel, and it's actually written in prose, and this is the second book written in prose that I've read this year, the first one being A Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. It's a coming of age story, and it features our main character, Xiomara, who is a black Dominican American girl. She lives with her parents and her twin brother in Brooklyn, I believe, and basically this book is about her navigating coming of age whilst being a part of a strict religious household. Over the course of the novel, she discovers slam poetry, and essentially through slam poetry she discovers her own voice. This book touches on a lot. It touches on being sexualized from a young age and being looked at a type of way because of your body, and like assumptions being made of you because of your body. Like, she hit puberty young, was really curvaceous. She talks about how the guys in the neighborhood start looking at her a certain type of way. They're looking at her like she's grown before she's even come into herself. So the story deals with all of that, and it also talks about growing up in a stifling household with strict religious parents whose views don't really line up with your own. We get to see Xiomara's journey in discovering her voice amongst the noise. I'm not normally into books written in prose, or at least like that's what I thought before this book and A Long Way Down, so maybe I'm wrong to say that. I really want to read her other books. This book was so powerful. It's thick, but it won't take you very long to read it. You can't see any of that. It just looks like blank pages. The way it's written, there you go. You can read that fairly quickly. Anyways, that was really good. I enjoyed that book. The next book that I want to talk about is P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han. If you know, then you know, but if you don't know, this is the second book in the To All the Boys I Loved Before trilogy. The first one being To All the Boys I've Loved Before, and that book, because obviously I don't want to tell you too much about this, being that it's a sequel. In To All the Boys I've Loved Before, Lara Jean, she's a 16-year-old girl, I believe. Every time she's had a crush or like loved a guy, she's written a letter and put it in the hat box that her late mum gave her. And then one day, without warning, these letters get out. These guys who represent different parts of her past, they all sort of come back in different ways, and she's like dealing with that, basically, like the repercussions of the letters having been given out. To be honest, this book felt like a typical second book in a trilogy. It's just kind of like a filler story. I didn't personally feel like that much really happened. A lot of the miscommunication in this book could have been resolved if they just sat down and spoke to each other. Well, we could have erased at least 100 pages from this thing if they just had a couple more conversations. Do you know what I mean? I guess we wouldn't have a story otherwise. I started this trilogy last year, or the year before, whenever the first movie came out, and I wanted to watch that. And then I read this because I wanted to watch the second film. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. After that, I read the 4th book in the Kate Bay series, and that was called Lattes, Ladyfingers and Lies. The Kate Bay series is one of those series that's like set in a small town and people keep dying and the main character is always there to solve it. They're not a police officer or a detective or anything like that, just your average Joe who happens to keep solving crimes. Like one of those. I'm kind of poking fun at it, but I do like those type of stories because they're just light-hearted, and sometimes that's what I want from a book, not something like super serious, which is kind of funny to say considering people keep getting murdered in these stories. But it's all just a bit unbelievable that it feels like a really light read. I do enjoy them because they're kind of like the book equivalent of a Hallmark movie, you know? Nothing that's like too taxing, but you get a level of enjoyment out of them still. And that's why I keep reading them. Again, because this isn't the first in the series, I won't go into too much detail. But basically, our main character is Francesca, and she's moved back to the town that she grew up in. She moved to New York for a bit. Now she's back. She's moved back because her mum died, and she's come back to run the cafe that's been in her family for years, like her grandparents started it. She'd not long been back in town before the first person showed up dead, and she I guess inserted herself into the investigation, and has just kind of been doing that ever since. Somebody shows up dead in their town every other month, so this woman is kept busy, like between running a cafe and solving murders. I don't know how she finds any time for herself. But yeah, like I said, they're just easy reads, nothing too serious, and for that reason I would recommend them if you're into those kind of stories. As much as I like to read books that I think are going to be 5 stars or I'm really going to enjoy, I also do like these light-hearted ones that you can just sort of like fly through, and I think because I listen to the audiobook as well, it just helps with that. It takes like no time at all. I feel like I'm really going through these. Considering I haven't done one of these reading updates in a while, I feel like we're just knocking them out. Anyway, the next book that I want to talk about is Big Girl Panties by Stephanie Ivanovich. The title of the book is kind of a pun or a double entendre or like wordplay or whatever, because the main character is a fuller-figured woman who basically embarks on a weight loss journey after like she encounters this world-class trainer or whatever, or like a trainer to the stars, a personal trainer to the stars on a plane, and they like get to talking, and basically he convinces her to let him be her personal trainer. That sounds kind of dead, like a dead description, right? But it was all right. It wasn't the best book ever, but it was enjoyable enough. It was like a chick lit type of thing, and it's the kind of book that I can easily see being adapted into a movie starring like friggin' Matthew McConaughey as a personal trainer and Rebel Wilson as the main character or something. I don't know. The main character is called Holly, and she's recently been widowed, and the personal trainer is called Logan. From the jump, Logan kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because his attitude towards her was just so, it's like all his thoughts were so stereotypical, with him being this like buff trainer guy and her being an overweight woman on a plane, and the whole thing of is she gonna fit into her seat or whatever. Like, it was just a bit, I don't know. One thing I remember is that he assumed that she would smell for some reason, which is just so dumb. You don't have to be fat to stink. Do you know what I mean? We all stink sometimes. I don't know. That was just a bit, I just thought that was really daft to assume that because she's overweight, she's gonna smell. Like, I just thought that was really stupid. And yeah, that's just one of many assumptions that he makes about her. But with it being the type of book it is, you can obviously tell where it's gonna go. I guess he has a level of growth over the novel, but there are still people in there, as she, spoiler alert, loses weight, who just look at her as, she's still fat though. And one thing as well about Logan is that he kept assuming throughout the book that she was poor. He trains celebrities and his fee is like fairly high or whatever. He kept assuming that to be working out with her, because she was paying him, he kept assuming that she was really scraping all her money together to be able to afford sessions with him. And I don't know why I thought that was so funny. For some reason though, that assumption did make me laugh. Like, he thought so highly of himself that she would go so far as to spend her last dollars to train with him. Like, come on. I don't know why, but that assumption really did make me laugh. Like, Holly'd gone to great lengths to be able to afford to work out with him, or like was moving money around, or maybe she was taking out loans so that she could work out with him. But it made me laugh, still, not gonna lie. I don't know if the author intended to make that funny, but I thought it was pretty funny, because like in his mind he was doing her a great favor, you know, helping her to lose weight. How gallant of him. When he found out that she wasn't actually dirt poor, he was actually kind of vexed, and I thought that was also quite funny. Shouldn't make assumptions, you know. I didn't hate the book, but I definitely didn't love it. I thought it was alright. It didn't make me laugh out loud or anything. I didn't find it super funny. The funniest thing to me was that he assumed she was poor and then was angry when he found out that she wasn't poor. I didn't really like Logan that much as a character. I liked Holly more. She wasn't that interesting. I didn't feel a connection to either character, to either main character, and the background couple, Chase and Amanda, they weren't all that interesting. I guess their spanking fetish was like the most interesting thing about them, and even that I felt was kind of out of place in this story. It just felt kind of random, but whatever. It just wasn't really, I don't know, I'm just nonplussed, if that's the word I'm looking for. It was whatever. And then the final book that I want to talk about is quite possibly the best book I've read so far this year. It's Unnatural Causes by Dr. Richard Shepherd, who is a forensic pathologist in the UK. It's a non-fiction book, and the only non-fiction book I've read so far this year. According to the text on the front of the book, he's actually the UK's top forensic pathologist. I'm not exactly sure what makes him the UK's top forensic pathologist. I don't know if it's because he's been involved in like a lot of postmortems. In the book he mentions something like 23,000 postmortems that he's done, which is just really, I can't even imagine what 23,000 bodies like looks like. Obviously they weren't there all at once, but that's that's a lot of people, you know, like that's insane as a figure. It was such an interesting read to me. This guy was the forensic pathologist in so many known cases. Like, for example, he was involved in the Joy Gardner case, Stephen Lawrence's case. He was involved in 9/11, like he went abroad to America when 9/11 happened. He was involved in not involved in the 7/7 bombings, but he was one of the pathologists involved in the 7/7 bombings. He was involved in the Marchioness disaster that happened in the 90s. He was even involved in Princess Diana and Dodi's postmortems, but he came in a few years after the fact, not in 1997, but I think the early 2000s, like 2001, when they were looking into when there was an inquest. He was also involved in the cases of Samantha Bissett and Rachel Nickell. Samantha Bissett, her daughter was killed along with her, but Rachel Nickell, her son wasn't killed. That story was really sad actually. He was found like holding her, trying to wake her up. Yeah, it was really sad, that story. But yeah, this guy was involved in so many of those known cases. So I think knowing all of those names and reading this book and seeing his perspective on those cases was quite interesting. Like, being that he was the forensic pathologist in a lot of those cases, it was really, I don't know, I just found the whole thing really, really captivating. And it was quite a long book, but I feel like it had me from beginning to end. He was even involved, sorry, I made notes here, right? He was involved in the Sally Clark case. That was the woman who was accused of killing 2 of her children. The Derek Bird's killings, the Harold Shipman case. Harold Shipman actually killed, one of his victims was a family friend of Dr. Shepherd's family. The Diana inquest was in 2004, not 2001. I don't want to overuse the word interesting, but the book was really so interesting. He talked about how, because he's been a forensic pathologist for decades, and he spoke about how pathology has changed over the course of his career, and how the bodies he's examined have changed over the course of his career also. In the 80s, he said people were like really thin, and then as time went on, the bodies were getting bigger and people were getting like iller, not like sicker, but ill. And how in the 80s they tended to have less body fat, but in the 2000s they had more body fat and more tattoos and piercings. Because like way back in the day, not that long ago, but previously only criminals and thugs had tattoos, whereas they're so commonplace these days. He would have had, I guess, like a front row seat to those changes, being that he worked on thousands of bodies. He also spoke about how his experience as a forensic pathologist has changed, and that they all used to be part of like universities and stuff and work more with the police than they do these days. Forensic pathology has almost been like privatized, so the police aren't really calling out forensic pathologists to crime scenes anymore because they have to pay like thousands for that. He sort of alluded to the police trying to save money, and a death that was suspicious is all of a sudden not so suspicious, especially if it's end of quarter or something like that, basically implying that to save money they'll go with a local pathologist rather than a specialist forensic pathologist, you know, implying that the true cause of death isn't looked into as deeply as it should be. I thought that was a little like, oh, you know, he's spilling the tea a little bit there. I thought that was very interesting because if you read the paper, you see how, you know, year on year the police's budget just shrinks and shrinks, and there are way less police officers than there used to be. He was basically calling them out on not looking into the true causes of death. The guy obviously explains it in way more depth than I'm doing right now. To try and keep it short, he basically explains how when he does a post-mortem, even if somebody's been shot and that looks like the obvious cause of death, he'll still look into whether they had any conditions and whether those conditions like impacted the person dying or made them die, if that made sense. Like, had they not had a condition, maybe they wouldn't have died from being shot. Yeah, they got shot, but what else was going on with the body is essentially what he talks about looking into. He's saying that these days, allegedly, if somebody gets shot, that's a good enough cause of death, rather than looking into if they have any other conditions that would have accelerated the death or whatever, you know? Not every single little detail is looked into or given as much attention as it once would have been. Being that he's been around for donkey's years, like, he knows how things have changed and how, I guess, how budgets is being spent. And he explains how not all deaths are looked into as deeply as perhaps they once would have been. Yeah man, this book was so good. I gave it 5 stars because I was just completely enthralled by it. He weaves in different elements of his personal life as well, so not just his time in the lab or the mortuary or whatever. It was a very interesting book. And also, one thing I learned is that there is a difference between a forensic pathologist and a coroner. What that difference is, I can't actually remember right now, but that is something that I learned and then promptly forgot. I'm gonna go and Google that again just to remind myself. Listen, I've not spoken about that many books, only 6, but my voice is super raspy. So let me wrap this up. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're new here, remember to subscribe. There should be a button, hopefully somewhere in this vicinity, as well as some suggestions of the other content I do linked here, here and over here. As I often say, I don't just do book videos on this channel, I also do hauls, reviews, that type of thing. So if any of that interests you, go ahead and click one of the icons on the screen. That is everything. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye! I hope when I edit that together it makes some sort of sense. She'd not long been, what's happening to my voice? Like, what is happening? I need water. These library books are so reflective, honestly. I feel like I have to just hold the book at a certain angle. No, that's not actually true. I feel like I look really low on the camera. I don't know, should I sit on the cushion or something? Raise myself up. You raise me up. I'm gonna sit on this pillow. Is that better? I don't know. The next book I read, okay, let me hold it first.